West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
I'm with our GOP chairwoman, Elise Stefanik from New York, and we are going to expunge the impeachments of President Trump. And I'm very glad to let you know that the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, came out in support.
I think it is appropriate just to let that before. And you should expunge this because it never should have gone.
Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy discussing new efforts to erase the two impeachments of former President Donald Trump from the congressional record. Joining us now, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post, Eugene Robinson. And Gene, your latest piece is entitled "Moves to Expunge Trump's Impeachments Would Be Laughable, If Not So Dangerous." And in it, you write in part, quote, "The right-wing media echo chamber will treat the expungement as legitimate, which would make the impeachment somehow illegitimate. The nation's information gap, already a canyon, will further widen. For the record, expunging a presidential impeachment is not a thing. It has never been attempted because it makes no sense. Both of Trump's House impeachments led to trials in the Senate, as the Constitution instructs. Is the Senate supposed to pretend that those trials, which ended in acquittals, never happened? What about the pages in the congressional record that chronicled the impeachment proceedings? Would they be ripped out and destroyed, sent to Mar-a-Lago for Trump to hoard in one of his cardboard boxes with his golf shirts and newspaper clippings? I guess you can't help but to joke because it is so ridiculous. But I have to tell you, every day as we look at national security secrets, nuclear information potentially stolen by a former president, and evidence of that coming up, you do have right-wing media and other claim to be news networks and websites and all covering what they believe the equivalent is, which would be Hunter Biden going to the state dinner or something like that. And we see legitimate, important news that is potentially critical to our country's national security being thrown away at will by those who just don't want to consider it real.
Exactly. This is one of the biggest and most serious problems facing this country today and facing our democracy, in my opinion, is the information gap, is the fact that in the right-wing media ecosystem, Hunter Biden is the only story worth telling, and President Trump's impeachments, they were, maybe they happened. Now it's going to be that in fact they did never happen. It's like an alternative universe timeline, and how can we have a democracy if we can't agree on basic facts, if we can't agree on what happened, on what we saw with our own eyes, on what is written in the congressional record? It is laughable on one hand, but it threatens to widen this gap that keeps us from talking across the divide, that keeps us from moving forward as a nation. And I think this just makes it that much worse. And look, this has the support of the Speaker of the House. It's just it's amazing.
And Jen, when you look at just the Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker, given another chance here to be the adult in the room and to say, stop with the nonsense, let's move forward, let's get some legislation passed, let's do things for the people who voted for us, taking a pass on that, and again, fanning the flames of this stuff that comes from the extremes of his party. I mean, we're talking about looking to the past again, just as a political question. Let's look back to 2020. Let's look back at Hunter Biden. Let's look back at all this stuff rather than looking ahead, as the man you once worked for, President Biden, is attempting to do, even with this Congress that he has to deal with.
That's right. I mean, Willie, I think it's pretty clear that Kevin McCarthy is motivated right now by fear of losing the speakership, fear of angering the base of Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, whatever the collection of people from the circus wing of the party is. He's fearful of angering them and angering the Trump base because he wants to hold on to the speakership. Now, we don't know whether or not Kevin McCarthy thinks truthfully this is the right strategy as Speaker or the right thing he should be doing as Speaker, because he's so motivated by that fear. It is, as Eugene just said, it is startling and it is alarming, because this is not what Congress is elected to do. This is not what the Speaker is supposed to be doing. But we also know that the contrast is quite stark between kind of leading the House of Representatives down a rabbit hole of trying to expunge impeachments versus actually trying to get something done. And I think what a lot of Democrats are betting on, and I spoke with Speaker Pelosi, and she's betting on this over the weekend, is that the American public is smart. And they will look at this and think, look, that is chaotic and crazy, and I don't even know what they're trying to do over there. I would like the people who are representing me to do something. We won't know until the election, but I think that's what a lot of Democrats in leadership and Democrats running the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and certainly the Biden campaign is betting on.
It is Tuesday, the 27th of June of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. You know that a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika, will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Yeah, and we have taglines, and we stick to them daily. All right. Well, Trump woke up today in a state, shall we say? Oh my God. He just doesn't realize that he lives in this world, and he's not necessarily the master of it. Okay. You know, any number of novels have been written where the tycoon has been put out in, the wilderness, and they have to live by their wits. Do you think this guy could live by his wits? I don't think so. He's never read a book about how to survive around bears. He would be bear food. Good thing, too. Bears have to eat. All right. Well, one can only wish for, a writer from Hollywood or Broadway, too, to put together some sort of timeline and a book. Write a book. And then we'll put it to music. Yeah. Have a little kick line of hobos. Hobos on parade. Do we have hobos anymore? Are they called hobos? I don't think so. I think all hobos are now homeless people. That's what it is. Homeless people. I forgot. Not unhoused. Homeless. They're homeless. Isn't it nice how in America we like to just criminalize and make villains of, I don't know, the people who are the most down on their luck? Jeez. And here I thought we were supposed to be a Christian nation. Well, I guess the Christian they're thinking about is the 100-year war between the Catholics and the Protestants. Let's go. That's not what I want. Nope. That's why we have America. You got Rick Scott down there in Florida. You know, after they've got like literal Nazis on the anniversary of like a synagogue killing, mass killing. And you got Nazis outside of a synagogue with Nazi swastika flags, not the Dixie swastika. Actual Nazi swastikas. Bunches of those flags, bunches of actual Nazis stiff-arming their arms up, Sieg Heilen. And Rick Scott then comes out and says, communists and socialists are not welcome in Florida. Really, Rick? I didn't know you clicked your heels so resoundingly. Resonated through the beer hall, Rick. He wants a beer hall putsch. Yeah. Trump's out there whining, saying that Biden is the most corrupt president in the history of the world. What about his millions and millions he took from foreign countries? And I'm like, okay, where's the money? We can follow yours, pal. Who released their taxes and who didn't? Huh? He thinks that because he is able to launder Russian rubles through how many shell companies for properties or whatnot, that everybody does. I'm corrupt, so everybody's corrupt. Really? Sounds like the usual conservative MAGA mind. I'm not saying Republican anymore because they're all MAGAs. They only care about cruelty. I'm not shocked that Stephen Santa Monica Goebbels Miller wanted to take drones and kill refugees in boats. Or even refugees out in the bush. Yeah, get them. It's really the chaparral, but who knows? Is it the chaparral? I don't know, maybe not. Maybe the chaparral's only up here. Well, he'd want to do that too. Just, for target practice. Too many liberals there anyway. Collateral damage. Yeah. So, he's not going to be tried for any kind of crime against humanity, is he? And he had a hand in all that family separation stuff. There's been questions asked of Stephen Santa Monica Goebbels Miller would suddenly, now that he has a child, a little girl, would he think differently about family separations? I'd say, hell no. He's not talking about white kids, the good kind. Unless they come from the bad families that vote Democratic, and then, okay, take them. But we're talking about black and brown kids. Put them to work. Yeah, put them to work cleaning saw blades in the slaughterhouse in the middle of the night. That's what they're there for. Oh, God. This is the world we live in. Maybe we do live in a DC Marvel alternative universe timeline. Now, Eugene Robinson didn't say DC Marvel, but he should have. Because we're living in some weird alternative universe timeline. We're on the other side of the sun in Bizarro World. Now, that was addressed in DC. I'm just saying. When we were little kids. Some of us read Archie, and some of us, I don't know, didn't. I looked at Archie, and it didn't, I don't know, it seemed a little flat to me. I need a little more punch. Yep. League of Superheroes, that's what we want. And then Marvel, I actually preferred Marvel over DC. It didn't take me long to move to DC. I mean, to move from DC to Marvel. When I was a little kid, yeah, you're enamored with Superman. It was on TV. You know? And I remember dreaming what it would be like to have the Avengers, the Spider-Man, Iron Man, etc., etc. Silver Surfer. All of them, like in movies and TV, and wouldn't it be great? We had cartoons eventually, not quite what we were hoping for. But yeah, the storylines, the art in Marvel greatly surpassed that of DC. DC at some point did kind of catch up some, but on all counts. But I still preferred Marvel to buy and take home and collect. Yep. Now, there were those I kept for reading, and those that I never took out of a plasticine cover, because otherwise their value decreases drastically. You learn that early when you're a kid. Now, some people collected, baseball cards. I did too, but I had a pretty substantial comic book collection that, unfortunately, when I got to high school, my academic professor father said I had to get rid of them all. Time to get rid of the kid stuff. Jeez. I tried to explain to him, I don't think you understand the value of these things, even the ones I've opened up. Tried explaining that, there were some storylines here that are out of the great works of literature passed down through millennia. The story of man. Nope. Had to get rid of it. We're not taking those for the new house. I had a lot of them too. So, unfortunately, I had to offload them at pretty much, I wouldn't say a loss, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And not certainly what one would expect now if they had them all this time. And I had it set up for the future. Even as a little kid, I was thinking of how it would be in the future. And little did I know how many of these Nazis would be running around taking over the world again. Jeez. See, that's where it's a little bit different than DC, Marvel, alternative universe timelines, because it's in this timeline that we're existing, and we got a bunch of Nazis trying to take over the world again. What are we going to do about it? Well, I guess we're going to have to tell you what we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin this fabulous Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, because that's what we do. We just jump from one to another. Bubbles of existence. Really. Well, what do we have on the rest of the menu? Well, at the top, we talked about Eugene Robinson's alternative universe timeline as addressed specifically that could be DC or Marvel. And they want to expunge Trump's impeachments? Of course they do. They want to get rid of black history, indigenous history. They want to get rid of the black cowboy. We just started hearing about the black cowboy, and now we have to get rid of him. Damn. Because it might make some white cowboy kid a little upset. There were black cowboys. That upsets me. No. Yeah, they can't even stand black little mermaids. It makes me feel bad that there's a black little mermaid, Mommy. Okay, let's go and disrupt a Holocaust moment of silence by coughing in unison. Okay. Yes. Okay, well, what do we have in store for you as we continue in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Ron DeSantis and his political allies seek to have a federal lawsuit brought by Disney dismissed. Of course they do. 7 groups of historians have now denounced a welcome reception at the Museum of the American Revolution for the anti-government extremist hate group Moms for Liberty. You know, the ones who decided to quote Hitler on their newsletter masthead. Was that by accident? No, of course not, because then right after, what did they do? Just what I said they did. Disrupted a moment of silence for the Holocaust by coughing in unison. That's why I call them Nazi Fraus. And Vice President Kamala Harris visited the Stonewall Inn National Monument in a pointed rebuttal to the hundreds of anti-LGBTQ plus bills that have been passed so far this year, because there's more this year. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Mexico arrested the former head of a federal anti-kidnapping unit in connection with the disappearance of 43 students in 2014. And this comes on the heels of 8 soldiers who have been arrested, by the way. And the first UN independent investigator to visit Guantanamo Bay said the 30 men held there are subject to ongoing cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment under international law. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so, who I will remind folks will be at Netroots Nation this year in Chicago. So we look forward to what she has to bring to us again for the annual event. Thank you, Kelly. Now, if you out there in radio listening land would then look across to the left at our homepage, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs incurred running this powerhouse of resistance, as we have been resisting for over a dozen years now. And we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many, many years ago. And they did, too. And all kidding aside, really thank you for your generosity to those of you who have recently become recurring Patreons, and to those of you who have been recurring Patreons and upped your patronage. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so by going to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable @Justice Putnam, of course. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime. And you can always find the show notes and links diary if you follow or just go to my social media feeds. And the links will be there. And I suggest that you actually read the actual reportage. It's important. Really. And then you can come to your own conclusions about whether it's humorous or not, how we've deconstructed it. You can follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWes. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right, I'm a little confused of whether Joe Burbank of the Orlando Sentinel penned this piece, or if that is just the photographer, but I believe it is actually the journalist. But this is out of the Orlando Sentinel as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Ron DeSantis and a revamped Central Florida Special District sought to scuttle a federal lawsuit yesterday, Monday, in which Disney contends its constitutional rights have been violated amid a long-running feud with DeSantis. Attorneys for the state filed a motion contending that DeSantis and Meredith Ivey, acting secretary of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, should be dismissed from the lawsuit. Meanwhile, attorneys for the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District argued the federal case should be put on hold until a separate case in Orange Circuit Court is resolved, or as an alternative, the federal case should be dismissed. Really, is that how you want to do it? Now, Disney filed the federal lawsuit in April, alleging constitutional violations related to a series of events that the entertainment giant says are rooted in retaliation by DeSantis and his political allies. A key issue is a law passed this spring invalidating development-related agreements that Disney reached with the former Reedy Creek Improvement District Board, which for decades had been controlled by Disney World. Well, the legislature did away with the Reedy Creek Board and gave DeSantis authority to appoint members of the successor Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board. In the motion to dismiss yesterday, which was Monday, of course, lawyers for the state argued that Disney lacked legal standing to sue DeSantis and Ivey over the issues. DeSantis, Ivey, and Central Florida Tourism Oversight District officials are the named defendants in the case. Although Disney has grabbed headlines by suing the governor, Disney, like many litigants before it who have challenged Florida's laws, has no basis for doing so, the motion said, in an accent totally made up on the moment. Neither the governor nor the secretary enforce any of the laws at issue, so Disney lacks standing to sue them. DeSantis and Disney began clashing last year after company officials opposed a new law that restricted instruction about sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. That's sort of like what happened. The Republican-controlled legislature in DeSantis passed a measure that would have dissolved the Reedy Creek District, but early this year, they stopped short of dissolution and decided to replace the Reedy Creek Board. Shortly before the switch to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, the outgoing Reedy Creek Board and Disney reached development-related agreements. The new board sought to undo the agreements, and lawmakers later passed a measure aimed at invalidating them. In the federal lawsuit, Disney raises a series of arguments, including that the state violated the company's rights under what is known as the Contracts Clause of the U.S. Constitution. As alleged in this complaint, the contracts were abrogated as part of an explicit campaign of official government retaliation against Disney for expressing a viewpoint the governor and legislature disagreed with, said in an amended version of the lawsuit that was filed on May 8th. The lawsuit added, neither the Central Florida Tourism Oversight Board nor the legislature has identified any legitimate reason or need to treat the contracts differently from long-term development agreements entered into by developers in other special districts. But the new district board countered in May by filing a lawsuit in Orange County Circuit Court, seeking a ruling that the agreements reached by Disney and former Reedy Creek Board are null and void. In documents filed on Monday yesterday, attorneys for the new district argued that U.S. District Judge Alan Windsor should put the federal case on hold until the issues are resolved in circuit court. A hearing in that case is scheduled for July 14th in Orlando. Williams of the Philadelphia Inquirer brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. 7 groups of historians have now denounced an upcoming welcome reception at the Museum of the American Revolution for who the Southern Poverty Law Center refers to as a extremist anti-American hate group, Moms for Liberty. They've written their members, the museum, and one group has canceled an event they had planned at the Old City Institution. Moms for Liberty has made national headlines since its founding in 2021 for its efforts to lift pandemic precautions, ban books, and limit conversations about race, sexuality, and gender identity in classrooms. Earlier this month, the Southern Poverty Law Center labeled the group an anti-government extremist organization. The group is scheduled to hold a 4-day sold-out summit in Philadelphia starting on Thursday, where aspiring school board candidates can receive training and hear from guests, including from Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. The group says Pennsylvania has one of the largest membership bases, second only to Florida. The museum has defended its decision to host the controversial group, arguing its mission is to share diverse and inclusive stories about the country's history with as broad of an audience as possible, and that it hopes to strengthen democracy through dialogue. You give a Nazi an inch and I'm telling you, they're gonna put you on the train car. All right. But thankfully, dozens of the museum staffers have pushed back. The historian groups are the latest to repudiate the museum's rationale for hosting the event, acknowledging it's unusual for them to try to intervene in what's essentially a space rental. Still, the group said Moms for Liberty was not a group simply espousing different points of view. They said it encouraged the harassment of teachers and librarians. And, when you're hooking up with brown shirt goose steppers like the Proud Boys to violently take over school board meetings, you know what I mean. The Organization of American Historians, the Society for Historians of the Early American Republic, and the Berkshire Conference of Women Historians published similar statements encouraging the museum to reconsider. And the group said they worry the museum is lending legitimacy to Moms for Liberty by hosting. The groups argued Moms for Liberty and their campaigns are antithetical to the complete, contextualized, and factual accounts historians try to provide through research. Moms for Liberty's work has even fueled attacks on historians' work, according to the Society for Historians of the Early American Republic, which spoke out yesterday. In its letter to museum CEO R. Scott Stephenson, the American Historical Association said it understood that legally it might be difficult to cancel the rental agreement, but urged the museum to try. The McNeil Center for Early American Studies at the University of Pennsylvania added discriminatory behavior should not be protected under the guise of free speech and academic freedom. that the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Vice President Harris visited the Stonewall Inn National Monument yesterday, Monday, to pay tribute to activists at the site of a watershed moment in the gay rights movement. And she spoke out as state lawmakers around the U.S. have introduced or passed hundreds of bills this year that whittle away at LGBTQ plus rights. That tally includes a recent flurry of bills that affect transgender people, including legislation recently passed by Republican governors vying for the 2024 presidential nomination. They run on hate. The vice president's surprise visit to Stonewall in New York City comes just days ahead of the 54th anniversary of the police raid and the rebellion it sparked on June 28th of 1969, as patrons and others fought back against officers and against a social order that kept gay life in the shadows. The uprising is widely seen as one of the most pivotal moments in the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement. Harris, in brief remarks, paid tribute to the courage and determination and the inspiration of the Stonewall activists, but also said that the spot stood as an important reminder that the community's fight for rights is not over. Former President Barack Obama established the Stonewall National Monument in 2016. It is the first U.S. national monument dedicated to LGBTQ plus rights, as well it should. All right, let us go to our break now, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Christopher Intagliata. It's easy to get lost in the salt pans of Tunisia. There are these featureless plains in the desert where the ground is sometimes the blinding white color of salt.
So it's a very strange feeling, and some people really feel uncomfortable there because you basically don't see anything.
Markus Knaden is at the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology in Jena, Germany. And he does field work in the salt pans with his colleague Marilia Freira.
So actually the car that we drove was often the landmark, so we could know how to return back to it because it's very easy to get lost.
While it's easy to get lost for them, that's not really the case for their study subjects, a type of desert ant that can walk for more than half a mile over these flat plains and still find its way home. And to be fair, the ants have a few tricks to be able to do that.
What we know from them is they use a sun compass to get an idea in which direction they walk, and they count their steps to get an idea the distances they cover in the individual directions. And by that, they always compute their relative position to the nest.
But the scientists noticed the ants had another trick too. The farther their burrows were into that flat, featureless plain, away from plants and rocks and other landmarks, the more the ants tended to build these big mounds at the entrances of their nests. They're like volcano-looking humps in the salt pan, sometimes more than 10 inches tall. And to get some sense of scale there, for these tiny ants, that's the equivalent of a human standing in front of a mountain the size of London's Big Ben. It's pretty big. And the researchers wanted to see if the ants really used these things for navigation, or if they were used for something else. So they destroyed a number of the mounds and put tall cylinders at some of the nest entrances instead. And at others, they put no landmark at all.
And what we realized was that ants with no artificial landmarks displayed a bigger effort into rebuilding their nest mound surrounding their nest entrance than those that had the artificial visual landmarks.
In other words, the ants presumably needed some sort of landmark at the colony to ensure everyone would find it. And if it wasn't there, they'd build it. The details are in the journal Current Biology. The scientists say the ants must be working together to do this, because the ones going out to forage need to collectively agree with the ones who stay put in the nest that the colony needs these landmarks, so the explorers need to convince the homebodies to build one. Kanadin says it's remarkable the ants can do all that with such tiny brains.
That always fascinates me, and that makes me always thinking, why aren't we much, much better with our big brain? But I'm so bad in navigation compared to those ants. I'm a bit jealous.
Then again, we don't really have to do what the ants do, because our big brains invented GPS. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Tulika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Music by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to scientificamerican.com for in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwon is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-Hee. I've been talking today with Seung-Hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC. For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
you love them enough to turn off your music and pretend like their music is your music.
Ah, this is Mommy's jam.
Then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Let's play it again.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The Senate has confirmed the first Muslim female federal judge in U.S. history.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The first Muslim female federal judge and the first Bangladeshi-American judge is Nusrat Chaudhry. Since 2020, Ms. Chaudhry has served as the legal director of the ACLU of Illinois. From 2008 until 2020, she served at the National ACLU office, 7 years as the deputy director of the ACLU's Racial Justice Program. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer described Chaudhry as a shining example of the American dream. She is the daughter of immigrant parents, a graduate of Columbia and Princeton, and Yale Law School. After law school, she clerked for a U.S. District Court judge and then at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. She has also served on the Presidential Task Force on Building Trust in the American justice system. Chaudhry has led litigation to protect immigrants from dangerous detention conditions. Her team advances gender equity and the rights of children in foster care and young people in juvenile detention, as well as First Amendment rights and governmental transparency. She is expert in voting rights. The confirmation vote? It was basically along party lines. 49 opposed, 50 in favor. Judge Chaudhry will sit in the Federal District Court in Brooklyn. Congratulations, Judge.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1880. That was the day that Helen Keller was born in Tuscumbia, Alabama. 2 years later, she lost both her sight and hearing due to an illness. With the help of a teacher by the name of Anne Sullivan, Helen learned how to communicate again. Her inspiring story was retold in the play and movie, The Miracle Workers. Keller spent the rest of her life advocating for people with disabilities, as well as a woman's right to vote and a woman's right to birth control. But did you know she was also an outspoken supporter of the cause of labor? Helen was a socialist and a member of the Industrial Workers of the World Union. In 1912, Helen sent a check to support textile workers on strike in Little Falls, New York. She accompanied the check with a letter that captured her commitment to the labor movement. She wrote of the women out on strike, quote, "Their cause is my cause. If they are denied a living wage, I also am denied. While they are industrial slaves, I cannot be free. My hunger is not satisfied while they are unfed. I cannot enjoy the good things of life which have come to me if they are hindered and neglected. I want all the workers of the world to have sufficient money to provide the normal standard of living, a decent home, healthful surroundings, opportunity for education and recreation. I want them all to have the same blessings I have. I, deaf and blind, have been helped to overcome many obstacles. I want them to be helped generously in a struggle which resembles my own in many ways." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid to upper 80s, more like the upper 80s to low 90s. Will be sunny throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the upper 50s. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then mainly sunny skies tomorrow with highs near 90. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen remains the predominant pollen in the area here in Rogue River proper, and it is rated high. The air quality index, though, for the region is good, and it has gone down to 16 parts per million. And that daytime UV index also, unfortunately, remains very high at level 9, so take care if you have those numbers. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.98 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And that's why it is the Weather Underground. Not just called, it is the Weather Underground. London is 72 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 77 and sunny. Rome is 90 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 73 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 73 and fair. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 77 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and cloudy with its persistent small craft advisory on the bay for heavy fog. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Mexico said yesterday, Monday, it has arrested the former head of a federal anti-kidnapping unit in connection with the disappearance of 43 students in 2014. Gilberto Ramirez was head of the anti-kidnapping unit for the Attorney General's office when the students from the Teachers College in southern Mexico went missing. Assistant Interior Secretary Encinas wrote that Ramirez faces charges of disappearance, torture, and conspiracy for the botched investigation into the abductions, which are defined as disappearances under Mexican law because only remains of 3 of the victims have been identified. Security forces abducted the students from buses in the city of Iguala on September 26 of 2014 and turned them over to a local drug gang, which apparently killed and burned them. Encinas also wrote in his Twitter account that 8 soldiers detained in the case last week have been charged by civilian prosecutors with disappearance. The soldiers are being held in a military prison and could continue there. Recent revelations implicate the military in the disappearances, but the motive for the students' abduction remains unclear, though there is growing evidence it may have involved police and military collusion with drug traffickers. Initial investigations into the alleged perpetrators were so botched with torture, mishandling of evidence, coercion, and forced confessions that many of the charges against the suspects were later dismissed.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Edith M. Lederer of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The first UN independent investigator to visit the U.S. detention center at Guantanamo Bay said yesterday, Monday, that 30 men held there are subject to, quote, ongoing cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment under international law, end quote. The investigator, Irish law professor Fionnuala Ní Aluan, said at a news conference releasing her 23-page report to the UN Human Rights Council that the 2001 attacks in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania that killed nearly 3,000 people were crimes against humanity. But she said the U.S. use of torture and rendition against alleged perpetrators and their associates in the years right after the attacks violated international human rights law and in many cases deprived the victims and survivors of justice because information obtained by torture cannot be used in trials. She said her visit marked the first time a U.S. administration has allowed a UN investigator to visit the facility, which opened in 2002. She praised the Biden administration for leading by example by opening up Guantanamo and being prepared to address the hardest human rights issues and urged other countries that have barred UN access to detention facilities to follow suit. And she said she was given access to everything she asked for, including holding meetings at the facility in Cuba with high-value and non-high-value detainees. The United States said in a submission to the Human Rights Council on the report that the special investigator's findings are solely her own, and the United States disagrees in significant respects with many factual and legal assertions in her report. And we have reached the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.